Chapter 32. Onward and Upward. No matter how well you learn to walk, sooner or later you will stumble. Sometimes you'll catch yourself in time, and sometimes you'll fall over. Sometimes you may even hurt yourself. The fact is, from the day you took your very first step, you have fallen down many hundreds of times, and yet at no point did you ever give up walking. You always picked yourself up, learned from the experience, and carried on. It is this sort of attitude that we are referring to when we use the word commitment in acceptance and commitment therapy. You can accept your internal experience, be psychologically present, and connect with your values all you like, but without the commitment to take effective action, you won't create a rich and meaningful life. This, then, is the final piece of the puzzle, the piece that completes the whole picture. Commitment, like acceptance, is a frequently misunderstood term. Commitment isn't about being perfect, always following through, or never going astray. Commitment means that when you do, inevitably, stumble or get off track, you pick yourself up, find your bearings, and carry on in the direction you want to go. This is well exemplified in the legend of the great Scottish hero Robert the Bruce. It's a true story that happened 700 years ago, in a period of history when the King of England ruled over Scotland. The English king was violent and cruel, and he brutally oppressed the Scots for many years. But in the year 1306, Robert the Bruce was crowned King of Scotland, and he made it his #1 priority to liberate his country. Soon after he took the throne, he raised an army and led it into war against the English on the blood-soaked battlefield of Strathfillan. Unfortunately, the English army had greater numbers and superior weapons, and the Scots were brutally defeated. Robert the Bruce escaped and went into hiding in a cave. Cold, wet, exhausted, and bleeding from his wounds, he felt utterly hopeless. So great was his shame, so crushing his despair, he thought about leaving the country and never returning. But as he lay there, he looked up and noticed a spider, which was trying to spin a web across a gap in the wall of the cave. This was no easy task. The spider would spin a strand and string it from one side of the gap to the other. Then it would spin another and another, weaving back and forth to build the web. Yet every few minutes, a strong gust of wind would blow through the gap, breaking the web and sending the spider tumbling. But the spider didn't give up. The moment the wind died down, it would crawl back up to the edge of the gap and start spinning again from scratch. Again and again, the wind blew the web apart, and again the spider started rebuilding. Eventually, the wind died down long enough for the spider to spin a truly firm foundation, so that the next time the wind kicked up, the web was strong enough to withstand it, and the spider was finally able to finish the job. Robert the Bruce was amazed by this spider's persistence. He thought, if that tiny creature can persist despite all those setbacks, then so can I. The spider became his personal symbol of inspiration, and he coined the famous motto, "If at first you don't succeed, try again." After his wounds had healed, he raised another army, and continued to battle against the English for the next 8 years, finally defeating them in 1314 at the Battle of Bannockburn, a battle in which his own men were outnumbered 10-1. Of course, Robert the Bruce didn't know he would succeed at his goal. He only knew that freedom was everything to him, and as long as he pursued that freedom, he was living a life he valued, and he was therefore willing to endure all the hardship that went with it. Such is the nature of commitment. You can never know in advance whether you will achieve your goals. All you can do is keep moving forward in a valued direction. The future is not in your control. What is in your control is your ability to continue your journey, step by step, learning and growing as you progress, and getting back on track whenever you wander. In the words of the great leader, Sir Winston Churchill, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Making mistakes. As we have seen, one of the sneakiest demons on that boat of yours is the one known as, "You must not make mistakes." This demon has a variety of other guises such as, "If you're going to do this, you'd better do it brilliantly," and, "If you can't do it well, there's no point in doing it at all." When you fuse with such thoughts, they will hold you back from learning new skills or facing meaningful challenges. If, however, you diffuse them, recognize that they're only words or pictures, then they no longer can get in your way. They're just mind stuff. When we make a commitment, it doesn't mean we won't ever screw up. Obviously, we try to do our best, but even then we will sometimes get it wrong. Besides that, is there really a person on this planet who always does their best in everything? Making mistakes is part of being human and an essential part of any learning process. The only way to avoid it is to do nothing, which is probably the biggest mistake of all. Commitment means we take effective action, allow ourselves the freedom to make mistakes, accept ourselves compassionately when we screw up, and carry on moving in a valued direction. Embracing uncertainty. Not long ago, I watched a documentary about Mel Gibson and the making of his film, The Passion of the Christ. This controversial movie was a graphically violent portrayal of the last 12 hours of the life of Jesus Christ. When Mel tried to interest the major Hollywood studios in the project, they all turned him down. The studios believed the film was doomed to failure, not least because of Mel's idea that the actors would speak their lines in the ancient languages of Aramaic and Latin. But despite Hollywood's lack of enthusiasm, Mel was committed to his project, enough so that he financed the entire film out of his own pocket. Not surprisingly, once he started filming, his anxiety knew no bounds. It was only the third film he had ever directed, and all of Hollywood had predicted it would lose money. Every day he would wake up thinking he was making a terrible mistake, that he was crazy, that he didn't know what he was doing. But that didn't stop him. Even though he was racked with doubt, day after day he would make his way to the film set and start directing. Throughout the day he would think he had no idea what he was doing, that the film was a disaster in the making, that he'd lose all his money, that he'd be a laughingstock. But he kept on making that film. Day after day he showed up on location and did his job to the best of his ability. He didn't know what the final outcome would be. That wasn't in his control. He couldn't get rid of his doubts, fears, and insecurities. They weren't in his control either. So he focused on what was in his control, his ability to direct the film as well as he could. History tells the rest. Mel finished his film, and despite widespread predictions of box office failure, it was a huge success, earning over $200 million during its initial release. The point here is not that your dreams will always come true if you persist. Although many motivational books claim you can achieve anything you want if you just hang in there. The truth is, sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. While there's no doubt that persistence makes achieving your goals likelier, this is never guaranteed. For every film that makes a heap of money, there's another that takes a major loss. The point is that you can feel anxious, uncertain, and riddled with self-doubt. And yet, even with those feelings, you can still take action. You may not be able to control your thoughts and feelings, but you can control what you do with your hands and feet. So this is what we mean by commitment, that you keep taking action, under the guidance of your values, no matter what thoughts and feelings may arise on the way. Redefining success. There's a potential danger in telling inspirational stories. Robert the Bruce freeing Scotland from the English. Mel Gibson making a hit film against all odds. The danger is in the way we define success. Whether we're talking of artists, doctors, athletes, business people, rock stars, politicians, or police officers, successful people are typically defined in terms of the goals they've achieved. If we buy into this woefully limited definition, then we're condemned to a goal-focused life, chronic frustration, and wanting punctuated by fleeting moments of gratification. So I invite you now to consider a new definition. Success in life means living by your values. Adopting this definition means you can be successful right now, whether or not you've achieved your major goals. Fulfillment is here, in this moment, anytime you act in line with your values, and you are free from the need for other people's approval. You don't need someone to tell you that you've made it. You don't need someone to confirm that you're doing the right thing. You know when you're acting on your values, and that's enough. Sula, Donna, and the other people we've met in this book weren't heroes of the sort we find in movies. They didn't accomplish awe-inspiring feats or triumph against overwhelming odds, but they were all successful in connecting with their hearts and making meaningful changes in their lives. Of course, as I've said before, living by your values doesn't mean giving up on your goals. It merely means shifting the emphasis, so life becomes about appreciating what you have now, rather than always focusing on what you don't have. It's also worth mentioning that every one of the clients I've written about did, on many occasions, go off track. They all lost touch with their values at times, got caught up in unhelpful thoughts, struggled with painful feelings, and acted out in self-defeating ways. But because they were committed, sooner or later, they always got back on track again. Take Donna, for example. It took her the best part of a year to recover completely from her alcoholism. There were plenty of times where she stayed off the drink for a few weeks, but then something would trigger another binge. The anniversary of the car crash, the anniversary of the funeral, the first Christmas day since her husband and daughter had died. Occasions such as these brought up many painful feelings and memories for Donna, and with them came strong urges to drink. At times, she forgot all the skills she'd learned in therapy and turned to alcohol to try to escape her pain. But as time went on, Donna got better and better at catching herself. Her first relapse came on the day of her daughter's birthday. This triggered an entire week of heavy drinking. Her second relapse involved only 3 days of drinking, and her third lasted for just 1 day. Donna learned quickly that there's no point in beating yourself up when you screw up or fail to follow through. Guilt trips and self-criticism don't motivate you to make meaningful changes. They just keep you stuck, dwelling on the past, which is something you have no power over. So after each relapse, Donna came back to the basic ACT formula. Accept your internal experience and be present. Choose a valued direction. Take action. So what does this mean in practice? Well, the first step, once you've gone off track, is to recognize it consciously, to be fully present with what's happening. At the same time, you need to accept that once this has happened, you can't change it. There is no way you can possibly alter the past. And while it may be valuable to reflect on the past and think about what you might do differently next time around, there's no point in dwelling on it and crucifying yourself for being imperfect. So accept that you went off track, accept that it's in the past and is now unchangeable, and accept that you're human and therefore imperfect. The second step is to ask yourself, what do I want to do now? Rather than dwelling on the past, what can I do in the present that's important or meaningful? Then the third step is, of course, to take committed action in line with that value. Try again. If at first you don't succeed, try again is a powerful motto, but it's still only half the story. The other half of the story is that we must pay careful attention to what we're doing in order to assess whether it's effective. A better motto might be, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And if it still isn't working, try something different. But there's a fine line to tread here too. Whenever you face a significant challenge, it's too hard. Demons will be on your back. You can't do it. Give up. Your mind will tell you. And the temptation then is to quit and try something else. Yet often persistence is precisely what is required. In the words of Thomas Edison, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. This is where your connection skills come in handy. By paying full attention to what you are doing and noticing the impact it is having, you're in the best position to answer this question. In order to most effectively live by my values, do I need to persist with my behavior or change it? Then, depending on your answer, commit to either changing that behavior or persisting with it. An attitude of optimism. As we saw in the last chapter, Sula joined a dating agency and started going out with a variety of different men. At first, this was an awkward, embarrassing, and nerve-wracking process for her. Her mind repeatedly told her she was a loser and that she would only ever meet other losers. But despite these unhelpful stories, Sula persisted, and over time she gradually became more comfortable with the process. Some of her dates were disastrous. The men were boring, arrogant, sexist, egotistical, or just generally obnoxious. On the other hand, some of her dates were a lot of fun. The men were witty, charming, intelligent, open-minded, and attractive. It was always hit and miss. At one point, she dated a guy for 7 weeks, fell madly in love with him, and then found out he'd been cheating on her. Naturally, she was devastated, and being human, she went off track for a while. For over a month, she fell back into her old habits, staying home alone, cutting herself off from friends, dwelling obsessively on her loneliness, and eating ice cream by the bucket to cheer herself up. Still, eventually Sula realized what she was doing, and she applied the basic ACT formula. As a first step, she made room for her sadness and her loneliness. She diffused from her story that life is worthless without a partner, and she chose to connect with the present instead of stewing pointlessly over the past. Second, she connected with her values, her desire to cultivate loving, meaningful relationships. Third, she took effective action. She resumed spending time with friends and family, and she also continued the dating process. A little while later, Sula fell in love with another man, whom she dated for over 7 months. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. They split up because Sula wanted to get engaged, but he wasn't ready to settle down. So far, there's no fairy tale ending to Sula's story. The last time I saw her, she was still dating. But she was also investing in meaningful, loving relationships with her friends and family and herself. And although this didn't get rid of her desire for a partner, it certainly gave her a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment. What's more, she had developed a sense of humor about the dating game. She had learned to see it as an opportunity to meet new people, discover new social venues, and learn more about men. She also used dates as an opportunity to try new activities, from playing miniature golf to riding horses. In other words, the process of dating became a valued activity, a means for personal growth rather than a painful ordeal driven by loneliness. As we go through life, we encounter all sorts of obstacles, difficulties, and challenges, and each time this happens, we have a choice. We can embrace the situation as an opportunity to grow, learn, and develop, or we can fight, struggle, and try whatever we can to avoid it. A stressful job, a physical illness, a failed relationship, all these are opportunities to grow as a person, to develop new and better skills for dealing with life's problems. As Winston Churchill put it, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. ACT is an inherently optimistic approach. ACT assumes that no matter what problems you encounter, you can learn and grow from them. No matter how dire your circumstances, you can always gain fulfillment from living by your values. And no matter how many times you wander off the path, you can always get back on track and start again, right where you are. Opportunity. Thomas Edison was perhaps the greatest inventor of all time. He patented over 1,000 different inventions, including the first phonograph, the first commercial power station, and, most famously, the electric light bulb. From a young age, he thirsted for scientific knowledge, and this passion kept him actively inventing for his entire lifetime, even after he was famous and incredibly wealthy. One of his most famous quotes is, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work." We could just as accurately say, opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in a monster suit and looks dangerous. Whatever valued direction you pursue, there will be challenges. These challenges will give rise to anxiety, insecurity, vulnerability, or other uncomfortable feelings. It is the willingness to feel that discomfort and to keep moving forward that allows you to make the most of life's opportunities. It took Thomas Edison and his assistants several years of hard work to make a commercially viable light bulb, and in the process, they failed thousands of times. They tried constructing light bulb filaments from many hundreds of different substances, but time after time they burned up, melted down, or simply failed to conduct an electric current. One day, after many more failed attempts, one of Edison's assistants complained, "It's hopeless. We'll never make a light bulb." Edison replied, "Nonsense. We now know more about how not to make a light bulb than anyone else in the world, which brings us closer and closer to making one that works." Many hundreds of failed attempts later, Edison finally succeeded and changed the face of the world as we know it today. Now that's commitment. Again, the point of this story is not that if you try hard enough, you will be rich and famous. The point is, you can appreciate the journey of life, no matter how far you are from your destination. Edison valued the process of scientific discovery and was therefore able to appreciate that each individual experiment furthered his scientific knowledge, regardless of the results. Naturally, it was thrilling when the experiments gave him good results, but he could appreciate the voyage of discovery, even when land was nowhere in sight. Notice that I said appreciate rather than enjoy. You can appreciate an operation that saves your life, but you probably won't enjoy it. Similarly, you can appreciate your life's journey even when it's uncomfortable, but it's unrealistic to expect that you will always enjoy it. As Stephen Hayes often points out, there's as much life in one moment of pain as in one moment of joy. We only truly know this when we practice connection, when we bring our full awareness to our experience right now, with an attitude of openness and interest. Choose to grow. A core theme in this book is that life involves pain. Sooner or later, we all experience it, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. But in every painful life circumstance, there is an opportunity for us to grow. Earlier in the book, we encountered Roxy, a 32-year-old lawyer who had been diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. Before her illness, Roxy's life had been totally focused on work. Success in her career meant everything, and she had indeed done very well for herself, getting promoted to junior partner and earning a huge salary. But she was working an average of 80 to 90 hours a week and was neglecting other important parts of her life. She lived on takeout food, rarely exercised, and was always too tired to spend time with friends and family. Her relationships with men were typically short-lived and superficial because she never had the time or energy to invest in them, and she rarely found time just to chill out and have fun. After her diagnosis, Roxy realized that her life was out of balance. Facing the possibility of severe disability or premature death awoke her to the fact that there's more to life than work and money. She realized that, for every one of us, our time on this planet is limited, and she started to think about what was really important, deep in her heart. She realized with a shock that her career was actually not that important to her, so she cut back on her work hours, started spending more time with the people she cared about, and began to take care of her health through swimming, yoga, and sensible eating. She also changed the way she related to people at work. She had always been so driven to excel. She'd paid little attention to social niceties in the workplace, and, as a result, appeared to her colleagues as closed off and cold. Facing the possibility that illness might force her to leave the workplace, she realized that this was not how she would like to be remembered. So she started treating her colleagues differently, showing an interest in their lives outside work and opening up, letting them know more about her own life. As she warmed to her colleagues, they in turn warmed to her, and she started to make some genuine workplace friendships. Indeed, over time she came to appreciate the social interaction far more than doing the actual work itself. By embracing the opportunity in her difficulty, Roxy made her life far richer and more meaningful. Of course, she would rather not have had the illness in the first place, but since that was something not in her control, she chose to go down the path of personal growth. Stories like this are commonplace. I have seen many people face a serious diagnosis, cancer, heart disease, a stroke, and completely reevaluate their lives as a result. But we don't have to wait until death is looking us in the eyes. We can commit to making meaningful changes whenever we choose to. And in keeping that commitment, we create a meaningful life. Feeling stuck? It may be that you've reached this point in the book and still haven't made many or any significant changes. If that's what's happening, you've probably come up against one or more components of fear: fusion with unhelpful thoughts, expectations that are unrealistic, avoidance of discomfort, remoteness from values. So if you're feeling stuck, or you're putting off taking action, take a few moments to identify what's getting in your way and think about how to resolve it. If you're fusing with unhelpful thoughts like, "It's too hard," "I can't do it," "It won't work," "I can't be bothered," "I'll do it later," then practice diffusion skills. If your expectations are unrealistic, break your goals down into smaller steps, give yourself more time, and allow yourself to make mistakes. If you're avoiding uncomfortable feelings such as fear or anxiety, practice your expansion skills and develop willingness. If you're remote from your values, then keep asking yourself, what do I really care about? What really matters deep in my heart? What sort of person do I want to be? Deep down inside, what do I really want? And if you're not quite sure how to implement these solutions, then go back to the relevant chapters in the book. This book was never intended to be read just once and integrated fully into your life. It's intended to be used as a reference book. As often as you need to, go back to the relevant chapters and read them again. And if you've read through the book without doing any of the exercises, now's the time to go back and actually do them. Applying ACT in different domains of life. In whichever domain of life you feel dissatisfied, whether it's health, work, friends, family, relationships, or something else, applying the basic ACT principles will help you transform it. Whatever you're doing, engage yourself fully in it. Whoever you're with, be present. When unhelpful thoughts arise, diffuse them. When unpleasant feelings arise, make room for them. And whatever your values are, be faithful to them. Using the 6 core principles of ACT can help you rise to the Serenity Challenge. Develop the courage to solve those problems that can be solved. the serenity to accept those problems that can't be solved, and the wisdom to know the difference. If your problems can be solved, then take effective action, guided by your values, to solve them. If your problems can't be solved, use diffusion, expansion, and connection to help you accept this. And the more you practice connection, that is, the more awareness you bring to your experience right now, the more you'll be able to tell which problems are which. No matter what sort of problematic situation you encounter, there are only ever two sensible courses of action. 1. Accept it. 2. Take effective action to improve it. If no effective action is possible right now, then the only option is to accept it until you can take action. Focus on what's in your control. Whatever you attempt to do, you'll get the best results when you focus on what is in your control, and the worst results when you focus on what's not in your control. So what is in your control? Well, mainly two things: your actions and your attention. You can control the actions you take, no matter what your thoughts and feelings may be telling you, as long as you are aware of your internal experience and you focus on what you're doing. And you can control how you direct your attention, that is, what you focus on, and whether you do so with openness, interest, and receptiveness. Apart from your actions and your attention, you don't have much control over anything else. For example, you have little control over your feelings, thoughts, memories, urges, and sensations. And the more intense they are, the less control you have. You have no control over other people. You can influence other people, of course, but only through your actions. Therefore, those people are not directly in your control. Only your actions are. Even if you were to point a gun at someone's head, you couldn't control them, because they could still choose to die rather than obey you. You have no control over the world around you. You can interact with and transform the world around you, but only through your actions. Your actions are in your control. The world isn't. Therefore, it makes sense to put your life's energy mainly into action and attention. Do what you value. Engage yourself fully in what you're doing, and pay attention to the effect your actions are having. Remember, each time you act in line with your values, no matter how tiny that action is, you're contributing to a rich and meaningful life. How far have you come? The whole purpose of this book is to help you escape from the vicious cycle of the happiness trap, to live a full and meaningful life, instead of basing your existence on chasing good feelings and avoiding bad ones. Of course, in a full human life, you will experience the full range of human feelings. You will experience every emotion, from joy and love to fear and anger, and willingly make room for them all. So how far have you come since you started this book? How often are you still getting caught in the happiness trap, running away from negative emotions and desperately striving for positive ones? If you really want to know, try this. Turn back to the very end of Chapter 1 and do the Control of Thoughts and Feelings questionnaire again. Compare your score now with your score when you started the book. If it's lower, then you're on the right track. If it's not, then you've still learned something valuable. That although you may have gained some useful ideas from this book, you haven't yet applied them effectively in your life. And if that's the case, there's no need to worry. It simply means you need to do more practice. There's an ancient Eastern saying, if you don't decide where you're going, you'll end up wherever you're heading. To live a meaningful life, you need direction, and your values are there, deep in your heart, to provide it. So connect with those values. Use them for guidance. Cultivate a sense of purpose. Keep setting meaningful goals and pursue them vigorously. At the same time, appreciate what you have in your life right now. This is important, because now is the only time you ever have. The past doesn't exist. It's nothing more than memories in the present. And the future doesn't exist. It's nothing more than thoughts and images in the present. The only time you ever have is this moment. So make the most of it. Notice what is happening. Appreciate it in its fullness. And remember, life gives most to those who make the most out of what life gives.